welcome to Setting the Spark, the podcast for homeschooling parents of little ones who are looking for a place to find answers and meaning in your everyday.
I'm Lori and Magnus, homeschooling mom to 2 little girls. We are Charlotte Mason inspired, and at this point that means we are reading, playing, and going outside.
And I'm Destiny Kasarik. I have a 4.5-year-old son and 2-year-old daughter, and I'm what I like to call a homeschool enthusiast, just kind of in the research phase, trying to figure out when and how we want to start our family's homeschool journey. So we're going to be your host during each weekly episode, and we'll be talking with a member from our panel about topics and challenges that unite us in our homeschool journeys. Our panel is made up of 4 moms who draw their teaching inspiration from some of the most popular homeschooling philosophies today. The ones we'll be talking about are unschooling, classical, Charlotte Mason, and Waldorf. And if you're not even sure what those words mean, don't worry. We'll be asking all those questions. So pull up a chair to our table and let's have a chat.
All right, we are here today with Ashley Guthas. So excited that she's here. I have actually known Ashley for a few years. We were pregnant with my oldest and her youngest at the same time. They were born about a month apart. So I knew Ashley before this whole parenting and definitely before the whole homeschool journey started. So we've kind of found homeschooling after motherhood, I guess, which has been really fun to grow in our friendship as moms and then also now as homeschool moms. Actually, I remember our first conversation. We went to that movie, the dinner movie theater. Yes. And I'll never forget, we were sitting there eating popcorn like before the movie started. And you were like, I really want to homeschool, but I don't know if my husband's going to let me. And this was like way true. Before. Like, yes. And look at you now.
I'm sure so many people can identify with that, because there's always like, well, not always, but sometimes one parent that's on board and one parent that's like, what is this?
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, that's an interesting place to start. How did you get Matt on board with home? Well, hold on. Let me back up. Tell us about your family and your husband and then how you got him on board.
So my husband is Matt, and we've been married for 11 years now. We have 2 daughters. Our oldest is 6 years old, and our youngest is 4. And your second question was, how did we get started with homeschooling?
Yes. Yeah. How did you get Matt on board if he wasn't originally?
Okay. Basically, that was completely God. I don't have another answer other than I started researching homeschooling, and classical conversations continued to pop up in just the most random places. And it ended up being that through random coworkers and new job prospects that my husband had, he met these other men, and they started sharing that their wives were homeschooling their children through classical conversations, and he gained a great respect for those families, and he was like, oh, okay, well, maybe we should try this.
Gotcha. And now you're a director of classical conversations.
I am a director of classical conversations, so yes, that is true.
Tell us a little bit about classical conversations, like as an organization.
Okay, as an organization, it's hard to know where to even start with classical conversations because there's so many, I guess, avenues you can talk through. But one of the biggest ones that stands out to me is that classical conversations seeks to know God and to make him known. And that is evident through their curriculum that they provide for us and through our community days where we meet each week. And so I love that there's an integration of subjects. And all of those subjects, as we learn, we see that God is the creator of the subjects that we study and that he is in and through all of those.
Wow. Okay. So it has a heavy religious influence.
Yes, I would say yes, it does.
And do you feel like because I don't know personally, I know Destiny knows a few moms that are classical homeschoolers. Is that true for like classical homeschooling in general or specifically classical conversations?
Based on my limited understanding, I would say that is more true for classical conversations and not necessarily the classical education overall.
Okay.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Yeah, basically, how does it differentiate, or do you know much about? Because when I think of classical education, I think of like princes in like England who are like, I fence from 1 to 2, and then from 3 to 4, I learned economics.
Is that your accent?
Yes,
We do speak only in an accent.
Oh, perfect.
I'm just
Okay.
kidding.
So you can be Southern
We
and
drink tea.
I don't know. And I guess we can, shelve that maybe under a misconception, or you can tell me, but there's this one part in one of my favorite movies. It's called The Count of Monte Cristo. Have you seen this?
yes.
Okay, so it's when they're in the prison and he's like, what are you going to teach me? And he talks about like he's going to like learn how to read and stuff. And he's like, of course, But he's like, mathematics, economics. Like he's talking about like all these subjects. And I'm like, that's probably classical education. So actually, how close is the fantasy to the reality?
Well, I think, and there's probably way more than this, but the things that I know so far is that some people look at classical education and they think, oh, you're classical because you include Latin. So that's one idea that people have. Another is that classical education means that you study all of the classics.
I could see what that could be.
And there are different classical programs that may truly elevate those items. But with classical conversations, we do include Latin in our studies, even from the what we call abecedarians, which is our 4 and 5-year-olds. Wow. So they are studying Latin already. But for classical conversations, the classical component of it is the trivium. And that includes 3 different stages, which is your grammar stage, your dialectic stage, and your rhetoric stage. And we can go into those more.
I'm actually very curious about, and who came up with that?
That is classical education from as far back as I know.
Okay.
The Greeks.
There we go.
I don't know.
I did read it earlier, but I can't remember.
That's okay.
Yeah, can you give us like a little summary of what each of the trivium is?
I will do my very best.
That's fine.
So, because with classical conversations, this is only my 2nd year being a part of it. So, or actually, I'm a year and a half in, so I'm still very much learning everything. But the grammar stage is what basically, it's when you are learning something new. You are learning all of the new grammar for anything that you're going through. So if you are going to become a nurse, like at any point in your life, you can be in a new grammar stage. If you're going to be a nurse, you're going to learn all of the new vocabulary that you need to learn to help you do your profession. And with children, this young age from 4 to, I believe it's 12, I think, they're constantly in this grammar mode. Everything that they're learning is constant new grammar. Everything is just pouring into their minds. And so with classical conversations, our program really capitalizes on how they're naturally built and wired to just soak all of this information in. And so we constantly are pouring new grammar into their minds, which come from science, math, history, Latin, geography. I can't remember what else. But it's just really neat that we really capitalize on what they're already gifted in, and we play on that.
Yeah, so they're kind of set up for success, and you're just building into that.
Thank you. Yes. The dialectic stage is really when starting about in those later child years, around 9 to 13-ish, when they're really wrestling with the information that they've been given and all of the grammar that they've been learning. And they start to ask the questions of, well, okay, if you're telling me that this water is going to turn into a vapor, well, how is that really happening? And they want to know the whys and the questions. And then once they get into that rhetoric stage, it's when ideally they would be able to take what they've learned through the grammar stage, what they've wrestled with in the dialectic stage, and then in that, did I say that correctly?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and then do a dialectic stage, or rhetoric stage, I'm sorry, is when ideally they would be able to then teach the information and they would be confident in what they're learning.
Okay. So how do you, since you're just in it, so then both of your kids are in the grammar stage.
Correct.
So how do you go about kind of introducing all of the different words or imparting that knowledge to them?
Like, is that all sent to you, like, from classical conversations, like, hey, this is like the curriculum for your day, or how do you put that together?
We have a guide, and the guide lasts for a minimum of 3 years, but it can last quite a bit longer. We go through cycles. So this current year, we're in cycle 1. And so every 3 years, we will repeat cycle 1, which means every 3 years, we're going to repeat the exact same information in all of the subjects. So it really you really get it, I guess.
Yeah, it's introduced a lot.
And so with my girls, what we love about the classical model of education in general is that it's so repetitious. Is that the right word? And we use a lot of songs because also at this age, children really have a strong memory and they can grasp a lot of information. And so you can make it fun by singing songs. We jump on our beds a lot for our learning. If we are learning, like, what are the 4 types of tissue? They'll say connective, epithelial when they're jumping, and then they'll just keep going back and forth, repeating all of the information. And so it's been a lot of fun. We jump on our stairs, we get out on our trampoline. So any way that you can just repeat the information. And then when my children show an interest in something, then we go further. At their ages, I don't feel it's necessary to completely learn what the types of tissues in our bodies are. But if they express an interest, then we go to the library and we dive in to learn more about that particular topic.
That's been a constant, I think, in every single philosophy, and sort of, this whole idea of, setting the spark or following the spark of your children. And I think just the beauty of homeschool is, I think every mom has said, if your child shows an interest in something, then you can dive deeper and do more. And it's cool that classical lends itself to that as well.
Yeah.
Yes, classical definitely, especially classical conversations, fully believes that the parent is the best educator for their child. And so really classical conversations basically gives a guide. So to follow up on your question, each week we have a full set of new grammar that we introduce. And so how we choose to introduce that and even which topics and subjects we choose to introduce in our home is completely up to us as the parent.
So it like they'll send you options for cycle 1 and you can choose from them, or you just choose the order.
We have a guide. And so that guide includes all of the material we need for 3 years in a row. So I can skip ahead and do weeks ahead if I wanted. I could go if I feel like we really want to get a certain week in and maybe we went on vacation or something, we can really dive into that week. But each week is also what I love. And I'm sorry I didn't bring the guide tonight. It could have helped me greatly. But the subjects are integrated. And so what I love is, like right now, cycle 1 is ancient history, ancient civilization. So we are studying starting all the way from Adam and Eve, and we are learning all about the Fertile Crescent. We're learning about Egypt. We're learning in our history sentences. It's all focused in that area of the world. And so when we learn about Egypt in a history song or our timeline, we go to our maps, and my girls can point on a world map and they can show you where Egypt is. They can show you where the Nile River is. They can show you where Tours is, which was once France. And like, I'm learning so much when I am studying Genesis this year also. I'm like, oh my gosh, I know where that is.
Yeah,
like, I know where Mesopotamia is now. I can point to it.
Yeah.
So I love the fact that I'm learning right along with my children. And it's making history come alive to me in a way that I never, ever got in all of the other schooling that I've had.
So the schooling that you've had, can you talk a little bit about that? Like, did you go to public school?
Okay. Yes, I did. I went to public school and I was a public school advocate. And my husband was actually the one that felt as though we would not put our children in public school. And I was like, no, like we will definitely put them in public school. Like I loved it. I had a great experience in public school all the way up. I went to college. I got my degree in Spanish and sociology. But yeah, I just, I don't know, but I don't feel like I really ever retained what I had to test for. And so that's what I'm loving about classical is that I'm retaining so much of what I'm learning with my kids through the songs that we're doing. And just really just that integration of reading a history sentence and then knowing where it happened on the map.
Yeah.
Too.
And you may have already said, but the songs, are those just things you're making up, or are they actually, is there like a CD of classical factoid songs, I guess?
Both. So classical does provide us with music CDs. And so all of our history sentences are done to music that classical has already provided.
Okay, gotcha.
All of our timeline song, which is, we love our timeline song.
Can we hear a little bit of it?
I don't know if you want to hear me sing, so I'll think about that. Maybe I'll work out the guts to do that by the end of this. But yeah, we love our timeline song because it takes you chronologically from creation and the fall all the way up through our current president song, which includes President Trump.
Wow, that's awesome.
So with so much, you said there's a focus on like memorization because of they're such sponges at this stage, right?
Correct.
Of the grammar stage. How does that work on an everyday level? Like, can you talk a little bit about when you start, how long you're learning, the lessons, and then I'm also just curious, this is probably the second part of the question here, but I'm just curious, like, are they receptive to wanting to do that? Like, are they excited about like memorizing things?
Okay. So I think I forgot the first part of your question.
Basically, what does your day look like? Like,
Okay.
could you just like
The first
walk
one.
us through, like, what is a typical homeschool day? Is that
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. So it varies because I am not super structured.
so you don't have to be like super type A structured to do classical?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. And that was my husband's biggest concern about us homeschooling was he was like, you are too free-spirited to ever homeschool our children. And so, but for us, it works. I think they love the songs. They actually do love the repetition, especially when I spend a little time prepping for it. Like for instance, last year, we finished cycle 3 and it was American history, and that was the whole cycle. And it was in 1493, Columbus made the first of 4 trips to the Caribbean on 3 Spanish ships, the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria, and we sang it. And so for that week in 1492? 1492, actually. totally got that date wrong, but I corrected it. But so for that one, when we were singing the song, I got out our laundry baskets. I had an empty toilet paper holder
how fun.
or paper towel holder, and I taped a little triangle of construction paper to make it
Like a
feel
ship,
like a
right?
ship.
That's
And so we
cute.
were singing our history song while we were in our little ships.
I love that.
And so when you take just the small amount of effort to do something that most of your homes would have, then it does make them engage with it more. Although there are days, absolutely, where we are sitting there and I'm like, girls, we are not eating until we sing this 7 times, and we're going to do it. Like, so let's get it done. But also, car schooling is fantastic with classical conversations because all of our curriculum is on CDs. I can simply place that on my iPod and we listen to it in the car.
Oh, that's cool. So not being super structured, do you have like a set schedule of like, we're going to begin at this time, or does it depend on the day of the week or just what you're up for?
I think I try. So I do try. And I do remember one of your questions now, the time frame. As far as for the younger kids, when we're going over the actual new grammar that classical provides, 30 minutes is probably what we would spend on new grammar unless they are showing an extra interest. Last year, my daughter showed a huge interest in Pearl Harbor. And so we spent a lot of time reading about Pearl Harbor, which led us also not at all related, but to the Titanic.
Interesting. But
and
I can
just
see, yeah.
boats and different things. And so we spent a lot of time learning there. So our new grammar stage was expanded and we spent longer.
So you're saying like 30 minutes a day?
30 minutes is what for the classical conversations
Wow,
piece.
awesome.
Yes. So
Okay.
that doesn't include just what we do on our own with reading and writing and math.
Okay.
So math is not included in classical conversations. There we do skip counting, which
Okay.
is, I guess, a math component, but there's not a math curriculum. You do have to supplement that with classical. So as far as a schedule of our day, ideally we are in our classroom by 9 a.m.
Okay.
And we aim to be done no later than 2. But most of the days, honestly, like after lunch, it's reading. I absolutely love spending time reading with my girls. And so we usually try to spend the afternoon time truly just sitting down and reading whatever books they want.
Yeah, I love that. So from like 9 to noon, are they like sitting at a desk just doing the work?
No.
Okay.
They are, if they are doing their writing in their journals or if they are doing their math, then yes, we're usually sitting down. But for our classical curriculum, no, we're, like I said, we're probably jumping on beds. Although we did rearrange their beds for Christmas, so the gap is a bit larger now. I didn't think about that. We won't start back until next week. But yes, so usually we're running around the room. They get to jump on the table, off the table, up the, we learned about prepositions. So we did all of the prepositions in our classroom. If it was over, they were going over the chair. So you guys can follow that.
That's easily. Cool. Mm-hmm. So, okay, you mentioned math. So what do you use for math?
What do I use? No, it's not Saxon. Singapore math is what we have found that we love so far.
Okay. And is that a classical math or that's just a math curriculum?
No, classical, I think, somewhat promotes Saxon math.
Yeah, I've heard that.
But we opted to not do that curriculum for right now.
Cool. And they're for the Singapore, they do a math geared toward that age group, 4 and 6.
Yes, they do.
That's cool. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned going to your classroom. So you have a dedicated space in your home?
Yes.
That's cool.
We do. We love it. So it's probably my favorite room in our house.
Yeah. And now we're going to take a short break from our interview for a segment of the show I like to call Pep Talks with Destiny. It's just going to be a short message from me to you as an encouragement for your week. You are curious. Why else have you tuned in to our podcast today? And you're in good company here. Consider the power of your curiosity, that drive that sparks your interest to know, to dive in, to find answers, that very same thing you want to fiercely protect for your children. Never-ending wonder and curiosity is something that is also inside you. Don't underestimate your curiosity. When we stop wanting to learn, we stop growing. Today, don't worry. You are curious.
And now back to our chat. Do you have anything, so maybe the math is one, but that would be considered sort of like an unpopular opinion or that maybe you don't necessarily jive with when it comes to classical conversations? Or not classical, but just classical education in general?
Not that I can think of, and that's I would be totally honest with you if I did, but I've just absolutely loved how much I have learned alongside of my children, and so for the year and a half experience that I have in it, I've really loved it. I love the community aspect. That's one thing I didn't mention is that classical conversations kind of has their own 3 points, which is it's Christian, it's classical, which we did touch on, and the community piece. So we meet for 24 weeks out of the year, and that's for our specific community. We meet every Tuesday. We're there from about 9 in the morning, and then our older students stay until 3:30. And so it's a great time for us to be with other moms and to kind of do this homeschooling thing together and know that we're not in it alone.
Yeah. So if you're looking for kind of an already created community, maybe for a new mom who's new to homeschooling that doesn't even know where to find it, Classical Conversations could be a good outlet because it's kind of built-in community.
Correct.
I feel like Classical Conversations from what I can tell, has done just such a good job of making those small groups. I mean, I feel like I know of like at least 3 around our area.
Oh, yeah.
And like you said, a really emphasis on community. So on the community days, I have a friend who does Classical Conversations as well, and she talks about how one of the things that just sticks out to her is that there's a time for when they can all do a speech almost, like practice their oratory skills. Cool. And so even like the 3-year-olds will get up there and they're encouraged to like talk in front of everyone. And I just think that that's such a cool idea to give them like a voice and practice speaking in front of people. Is that something yours does as well?
Yes, absolutely. And that should be across the board at any Classical Conversations community that you go to. So we have the presentation time in each class, and each child is supposed to get about 3 minutes. And they are to use that ideally as 2 minutes of them presenting on something. And it's totally the parent's choice or the child's choice, depending on how your parenting style is. And so For the younger children, usually it's like a show and tell, like, this is my stuffy and it's special
That's
to me
cute.
because, but they have to, most of them have to get up and introduce themselves. Hi, my name is Ashley, and today I'm going to be telling you about Fred, my imaginary friend, or whatever it may be. And then what I love about it also is that at the end of their presentation, they have to field questions, and they have to say, does anyone have questions? And then they have to look out at all of their classmates and the adults in the room as well, and they have to field those questions.
Wow.
And it's really neat to watch these children gain confidence over the year, and it's funny to listen to them too. They have great stories.
Yeah, I bet. I was just thinking what my oldest would probably say or do if she would. But I think, I mean, public speaking is like the biggest fear in America, but it can really set you up for doing well in certain jobs, especially.
And just confidence, like you were saying, in general.
But having a safe space to practice that in, because it's people that they have been with, the whole year and they're comfortable with.
So I don't know how familiar you are with some of these other homeschooling philosophies, but I'm curious, like, since you do classical conversations, is there an antithesis of that for you, like something you wouldn't want to stress because you're going towards, the goals that you have, maybe the opposite for you, like you're not at all into?
So within my own family, something that I would not be interested in this homeschooling journey, anything super strict would not be great for us, I think. And now there are we have a sister community that meets at the same space as we do, and I've been to that community a couple of times, and that is each community, I will say this, for anyone listening that is investigating classical conversations, go to a lot of different communities because each community does have its own flair. They should all be true to the classical conversations model, and you should get the same curriculum and have the same expectations, but all moms are different.
Yeah,
and
true.
Moms do tend to flock to different moms that they are similar to. And so I've been to some communities that have some very strong type A moms that are very much, we're going to get this done. We're going to start on time. And if you're not on time, we're going to let you know. And so if that's you, find that community. And then there are communities that are more laid back and free spirited, and that could drive you crazy if you're type A. So really go, especially classical conversations is growing tremendously. And there's probably guaranteed, unless you're in a really remote area, that you could at least find 2 communities that are fairly close for you to drive at least once a week to.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you said that because, I mean, you never know who might have a conception that, classical conversations is inherently strict because of all of the curriculum involved or whatever. And to say, hey, like, you don't have to have that style in order to be part of this educational style, I think is kind of liberating. So
yes, because it is all about entrusting the parent with the responsibility of leading. Classical just gives, for those of us who are super free-spirited, I have a guide. I have something that I can look at that can give me...
kind of grounds you. Like,
yes, exactly. It helps me, and having that weekly accountability is great.
So you mentioned, just kind of going back to like your prep work, do you plan, this is a personal question because I'm, we're not fully doing homeschool with my oldest only being 4.5, but I really like get excited about like planning, but I've yet to actually like really do it. And so I'm just really curious. I mean, do you sit down like at the beginning of a semester and plan out week by week, or do you just, maybe like a Sunday night before? Like, what does planning look like for you?
In my dream world, yes, I would plan every Sunday at the minimum for the upcoming week. In reality, especially in the fall semesters, because I'm also a photographer, and so I don't plan very much, which is great for these early ages, I believe, that I have the guide, I have the CD, so it's already there for me, and in these ages, I'm just working on them, really just memorizing all of that information, and it's easy to make it fun when you jump and when you dance and you do limbo or whatever works for you. And so it is my hope and my plan for 2019 that I will be a much more dedicated planner to my homeschooling. And being a director has forced me to plan ahead for this year, but it's mostly been the planning for the overall community and not necessarily my individual household.
Gotcha. Okay. And since you're the director, then you're even seeing like what the older students are doing and kind of what's to come then for your kids.
Yes. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why we say that we will take this homeschooling journey year by year. But the more that I learn and see from our challenge programs, which starts at 7th grade, I am just overly convinced that this program is exceptional and that it will absolutely prepare our girls for greatness, which may sound over the top, but I just really love that we're all about teaching kids how to think and not what to think. And you really see that coming into play when they hit the challenge levels. Right as a 7th grader, they start wrestling with very hard topics, and they have to debate both sides of really difficult topics. And I love that it allows them to do so and allows them the freedom to wrestle with all sides, and that it's not something that is just forced upon them that they have to learn or they have to accept the facts presented, but that they have to come to those conclusions on their own.
Yeah.
Yeah, teaching those problem-solving kind of skills is just invaluable for whatever they're going to be doing.
Well, and again, I kind of feel like that's a pro to homeschooling maybe versus other types of education is you're teaching them specific lessons, but that aren't just to be applied for like school knowledge. It's for life skills.
Right.
Yeah. Versus just so they could pass a test. I mean, yes, it's academic that you're, learning the debate skills and whatnot, but that's that problem solving is such real world experience.
Yes.
It's really great.
Cool. So to sum up classical conversations, I mean, like you can do that in 30 seconds, but so there's trivium. There's different levels. There's different topics that you're doing in cycles.
Yes.
The cycles go by year?
Yes.
Okay. So cycle 1, 2, 3, that's 1 year or no?
All of cycle 1 is 1 year.
Okay.
And then next year we will start cycle 2.
Which is a repeat of the year before?
No. So cycle 1
I'm glad I asked.
is, yes, thank you. Cycle 1 is this year. And so next year we will be doing cycle 2. The following year, cycle 3. After that, we will return back to cycle 1.
Okay.
So cycle 1 has 24 weeks ready and prepared for us.
Okay.
Does that
And
help?
it's the same topics that are being represented basically 3 years later?
Yes, it's
Okay.
the exact same. There's
Perfect.
no change unless classical does a curriculum update, which they did this current year. So if you join now, you will have a brand new guide.
And my
ideally-
understanding of that is that it's worldwide, right?
Yes,
So
it
it's
is.
everybody's doing it at the exact same time
Yes.
across the whole earth.
Yes.
And that's
Whole
very
earth.
cool.
Absolutely.
The entire earth.
The entire
I just wanted to
This whole
rise
planet.
to the occasion of the greatness that is this curriculum.
our planet.
Yes, so if you are a missionary family or planning to go overseas, you can take classical with you.
Cool.
And you can be connected to communities here.
Thank you, Ashley.
We want you to let us know how you're setting the spark this week. Tag us on Instagram with a post about your homeschool day and be sure to use the hashtag #HowISetTheSpark. You can find us on Instagram at Setting the Spark Podcast. You could be featured on our account and enter to win a monthly prize. And shout out to Carrie, who was our December winner. Check out our account to see Carrie's posts about how her homeschool day and what that looks like for her. All right, so in today's episode of The Spark Within, I'm going to be doing Daffodils by William Wordsworth. My mom had me memorize this poem. I'm actually going to be reading it. This is not for memorization currently. But here in Georgia, I've noticed my daffodils have started coming up out of the earth already, and so I just thought it would be fitting. So here we go. Daffodils by William Wordsworth. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 I saw at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jaunced company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. For oft, when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. We've loved having you at our table. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and visit us at settingthespark.com to learn more about your hosts and our panel of moms. You will also find resources that you may find helpful in your homeschool practice. See you next week. We'll save you a seat.